Hey guys, I'm Allie, and I'm here with
Josh.
And Eli.
And we will be talking about dystopias on our podcast today. Our first question for us is, what are dystopias? What do you guys think about that?
Well, a dystopia is typically a place where everything and everyone is, acts a certain way, where it's sort of like they're brainwashed. What do you think, Eli?
Well, yeah, like a dystopia, the idea of a dystopia is not an ideal world. It's the exact opposite. It's an unideal world where everything is bad and you don't want to live there.
Yeah, because in a dystopia, it usually isn't a matter of a choice for citizens who live there. It's always just set in a certain way, and it's sort of like a machine because it keeps going on. This day is the same after the same is the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not like the people in a dystopia know they're in a dystopia, same as if the people in a utopia don't know they're in a utopia. It's just the world to them. That's all they know, and they don't think of it as a dystopia. They just think of it as the world.
Yeah,
That's because it's most of the time dystopias are based in generations. That's most of the time typically because after generations people forget where they came from, what it was like before, and how they were raised to think in this new place. It's like being adapted or adapting to a new situation.
yeah, that is very true. That is what happens in most dystopias, Josh. So, our next question is, how do they come to be? How do they become dystopias? What do you guys think about that? How do they become dystopias?
I think it's a very interesting question because it could just be, the world. Well, I feel like dystopias often come after times of huge turmoil or war, or the government or leaders of a place try to take over but they resist, and then the world just becomes a barren wasteland. But that's not always a dystopia. Dystopia could just be a different place,
Yeah, because like you said, I was thinking it's after something very bad that happened in the world, or corruption, or something just went wrong, so they tried something different that would keep people in the certain lines that they wouldn't change what they were doing.
Yeah, so basically by telling people when they're being raised, oh, you should do this, and it's better if you do this than that. It will teach them they'll teach them to do the right thing instead of doing the thing that caused the world to go wrong, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
So next we have people in the dystopia. What are they like? What are they mostly like? What do they act like? What do they do? What do you guys think?
Well, people in dystopias, like I said, they're most likely brainwashed to do what people want them to because of a disaster. But sometimes they could also be told to do the wrong thing in case of maybe they want to take over a place and they'd brainwash people to thinking, oh, this is a good way, you guys should save the world by actually destroying it.
Now, that's actually a good thought, but I think they're not necessarily always brainwashed. I mean, you don't have to be brainwashed to live in a bad world. They might be just like us, We might be living in a dystopia, and there could be somebody else thinking about us, and they're like, oh, that's such a bad world. What's their world like? I think the people in a dystopia could just be regular people, but you're right, Josh. They could have just been told that they were in an unideal world by somebody else who was living in an ideal world, and they just maybe forgotten or brainwashed. That's a good point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, with the fact that they don't know and they could be normal people just like us who are in a world, how you said, because other people could say that this is bad, this is a bad world, when people inside it say it's good. Like in Divergent, I remember that they were in factions, and the factions wanted them to act exactly how they were supposed to be in that certain kind of group, and if they didn't, then they would kill them because they thought they were divergent.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's also an example of that in the Hunger Games, where they create the districts not to separate people by who they are, but just for different things. Different districts produce different things, but the idea of the districts is just to keep things in order because, like we said earlier, there was a giant war and an uprising, and then the government took control. And also, yeah.
That also reminds me of the Maze Runner, where everybody is assigned different jobs. Like, they're the runners, the keepers, they're also, I'm pretty sure, like, butchers. They all play different roles in the community, help each other survive. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was good, but let's continue this conversation.
Yeah. So, actually, one thing I literally just realized, live right now, is that when you think of dystopias, actually, when you think about it, there's a lot more organization and, assignment than utopias. Because if you think about it, like Josh said in the Maze Runner, they're all assigned to jobs so that they know exactly what they're doing so that they can get things through. And in Divergent, they're all split up into factions. And in the Hunger Games, they're split up into districts. How many more can we think of? I think that's actually really interesting, that dystopias are actually a lot about organization, and that might be why they're dystopias, because they're being chained into, different little civilizations, their little cities.
Yeah. Sorry. Like a utopia, it's basically just a place where everybody's happy, they get to chill out, have fun. It's not really that organized.
It's the freedom of it that makes it so perfect, such an ideal world.
Yeah, because in these dystopias, there is no freedom. And though it may cause, there might be peace, but it's really disappointing, and it's really sad for the people there because, people don't like to have to be put in a certain way and just continue to do the same thing over and over again. So now we'll continue to our next topic. So, like we mentioned earlier, our world in comparison to dystopias. What is our world like that could be the same or different with a dystopia?
Well, you know how in our world we have different countries, continents, states in USA, and well, they sort of split us up just by location. There's nothing really that big about it, but you also get split up in a dystopia by other factors. But still, you're all being split up for practical reasons.
But then again, you're not being divided on purpose. Nobody's controlling you. I mean, you're allowed to move. Like, you might live in Canada, you can move down to the U.S., and then you might live in Montana for a while, and then you fly over to Maine. You could live in Maine. There's no real confinement. But, I think that's really true. And a lot of dystopia is just opinions. That's what I believe. I don't know.
Yeah, and, sometimes I think beliefs with the factions reminds me a little bit of religion because they all believe different things. But religion is different because you can choose to believe in it, and it's, it's not negative, when factions are negative because they're saying you can only believe in one of them.
Speaking about religions, well, I just realized most of the books and shows and movies I've watched with the dystopias, there's no religion. I'm guessing maybe instead of religion, they have these the rules that prevent them from making their own little, I don't know how to say this, imaginary existence to the world, solution.
Yeah. So now that I think about it, when we were talking about being confined and the organization of a dystopia, how it's like a jail, I was thinking, think about Divergent. You're allowed to, once you get to a certain age, you're allowed to switch factions.
Yeah.
So is this world really as much of a dystopia as we think it is? Are all dystopias actually dystopias? Or do we just look at the bad parts of it? I mean, there may be some really great, beautiful, awesome parts of dystopias.
Yeah, because Divergent didn't seem to be that bad except for the fact of killing people who could decide on their own. Yeah, so it wasn't, honestly, Divergent wasn't as bad as The Giver, so to say, because, you could choose what you wanted to do, and it wasn't all and once you got into the faction, you could choose a job after initiation. But, it still had, if you were different and you weren't showing what they wanted to see and you weren't acting a certain way, like a Divergent person, they would kill you, which is one of the greatly bad parts of that dystopia.
Yeah, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, in most dystopias, there may be consequences for being different. So, like how, Divergent were killed, other people. I mean, I'm sure the dystopia leaders would probably want everything to go in order because they're so organized. So, if they didn't, they wouldn't want people meddling with their like plans.
Yeah.
If it's gonna.
Yeah.
Like The Giver too, because everyone was assigned their job, and the receiver had to take on all the memories, and they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I think that lots of dystopias are actually created I really started thinking about this once we started mentioning The Giver, how dystopias are created when somebody wants to achieve perfection. Like, achieving perfection in the end will actually make things worse, I believe. Because in The Giver, when they try to achieve perfection, they end up making people every day have to take a daily medication so that they don't think of leaving or stuff like that. Everything is super clean. You're only allowed to ride your own bike. You always wear the same thing every day, and all the homes are the same. It just makes everything so confined, it's like too perfect. So perfect that you just want a world that has its scars, its cuts, its bad stuff, its bruises. Yeah.
Because they even make the pill so nobody feels like affection for one another. And they find affection imperfect, which I mean, it's okay to have things like our world that aren't perfect, but it's not like okay to take away some of the most joyful
Natural.
things.